What's going on, guys? All right. So, first of all, thanks to those joining me live and to those joining me on archive. I'm very late here on a prediction for the upcoming boxing fight between Keith Thurman, one time, and Danny Garcia, Swift. Let me say this. I saw the weigh-in, and I'm excited about this fight. I really am. And if you're not excited for this fight, I don't know. And you call yourself a boxing fan, I don't know if you have a pulse or not, right? But I am excited for this fight. First of all, I can't wait for this fight. It's on CBS, and I encourage all boxing fans to not. Of course, you're gonna watch the fight. Why not, right? Free TV, all right. But I encourage you to tell a friend about it. Tell someone who's maybe you always hear talking about how they don't put on great fights in boxing no more. We all have friends, even family like that. All of us, right? And this is a good opportunity, man. I think this is going to be a great fight. I personally don't see how this fight is not going to be any good. I think it has a recipe for everything. A lot of hardcore boxing fans, and and this is me included, we do a lot of nitpicking, right? And what I mean by that is we're very critical of the fighters. And sometimes to an outside eye that can come off as, man, like these guys just talk shit about boxers all day, right? Well, no, that's just we critique fighters because no fighter is perfect. So, and that's what we do, right? And both these fighters get their fair share of critique. They're not perfect. They have room for improvement. I think they know that, right? I think they look back at their fights, they look back at the tape, and they say, "Yeah, I could improve as a fighter." Why wouldn't they? Go to say I'm perfect now. I don't have nothing to work on. But with that said, a lot of the things we're criticizing for is actually going to be the recipe of a great fight. Because yes, both guys can get hit. Yes, both guys aren't known for having impeccable defense, right? I think they're okay. I don't think they're terrible, okay, when it comes to that department, but they're not exactly defensive wizards. Okay, nobody's going to put any of these guys in the top 10 all time in defense, okay? But they're okay. At the highest level, what this is, as far as today's boxing, right? At the highest level of boxing, you're going to get hit. And both these guys, whether one fan or the other likes it or not, are going to get hit, right? So let's talk about it, okay? Who do I think's going to win this fight? Well, let's talk about it, and I'll let you know at the end. I'm going to make you wait. I'm going to make you wait a little bit. Right? It's just a little bit, like that 50 Cent song, just a little bit. Right? It's just a little, itty bitty little bit. Right? Let's check it out. So first of all, as I was looking at fight film, right? As I was looking at some fights here, I've been throughout the week. Keith Thurman fights, Danny Garcia fights. Now it's hard sometimes because there's a thing called the halo effect, right? Meaning that the person in front of them, okay, that they look spectacular against, and this goes for both guys, or like it's common sense, right? The better they looked, the lesser the opposition. It's common sense. So you can gauge, but I will say this: the right hand of Keith Thurman, from this is just the eye test, of course, right? And of course, there's more variables to it, but I don't see one punch other than the jab, obviously, right? But the jab aside, which, in my opinion, Danny Garcia does not do a good job at. I think Keith Thurman could be a lot better with a jab, but he definitely a little more than Danny Garcia, in my opinion. But with that said, jabs aside, I'm talking about power punches here. The right hand of Keith Thurman, in my opinion, is going to be the story of the fight. Because I don't see anything in Danny Garcia's arsenal, right? None of his hooks, okay? Okay, shout out to Dwyer that calls him a mid-range hooker, which is hilarious. Okay, uh, but I'll meet you mid-range. But anyway, um, better name than mid-range hooker. All right, we just got to. He hooks for mid-range. Just say that. Right? But anyway, I don't see a punch in Danny Garcia's arsenal. I don't see one. If somebody sees one, you tell me. That's going to beat Keith Thurman's right hand. I don't see one. Right? I just don't. Keith Thurman, and he actually, and I'm talking specifically when he throws it down the pipe, because he can also loop it a little bit, just like Danny Garcia does. Not as effective as Danny Garcia in that department, but when it comes to the straight, I don't see a punch in Danny Garcia's arsenal as far as power punches that are going to beat Keith Thurman to that punch. And that theory of mine is going to be proven wrong or correct in the first round. First minute of the fight, if Danny's beating Keith Thurman to the punch, then you can come on here and say, well, DStyle was completely fucking wrong on that one. But I honestly don't believe I'll be wrong about that. Doesn't mean he's going to win the fight, but it's going to be a big component of the fight. I believe it's going to be the story of the fight. And will ultimately, well, I guess I already said my prediction, it's going to win him the fight. Also, I also believe that Keith Thurman is, again, none of these guys have impeccable footwork, all right? We're not going to put them in the top 10 all time or nothing like that, but Keith Thurman's a little better on his feet, in my opinion. I think he has better footwork than Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is a little too flat-footed, in my opinion, all right? I'm not going to exactly say that Keith Thurman is twinkle toes either, but I just think he's better in that department. None of these guys really strike me as these impeccable head movement dudes, okay, or anything like that. Like I said, defense isn't their big thing. They're okay at it, as I said, and the reason I'm even mentioning the footwork is Danny Garcia, all right, is very good at mid-range in the trenches or close to the trenches, right? And none of these guys are really hardcore inside fighters, but I seen Keith Thurman grind in the inside and Danny as well, right? But I believe the difference here, I think they pretty much break even on the inside. I think Danny Garcia has a slight advantage mid-range, but Keith Thurman fights a lot better on the outside. And that's going to allow him to be the rank general in this fight. I think it's going to allow him to dictate where this fight goes and when they exchange, if they do exchange, right? And when he wants to release that firepower, because I don't think Danny has that luxury. Danny's going to have to get within range, punching range of Keith Thurman in order to set anything up, where Keith Thurman doesn't necessarily have to do that. All right. Now, in fairness, both these guys have somewhat of a stealthiness about them. All right, a stealthiness about them. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's hard to explain why they're so fucking effective, right? Now, me personally, I've never gone against Keith Thurman. I picked him to beat Porter, for example. I was pretty spot on about that. But when it comes to Danny Garcia, I have been wrong about Danny Garcia. Right? It's I think once or twice, one for sure. I'm trying to think of the second time, but I've been wrong. Yes, I was wrong on the Amir Khan fight, and I was wrong with the Matisse fight. Right? Now, granted, he was getting outboxed in the Khan fight until he caught Khan, and we all know Khan has a fucking glass chin, right? But I got it wrong nonetheless, right? Also, in the Matisse fight, in my opinion, Matisse was winning that fight till his eye got fucked up. Not that he still lost, right? But I think it was a very close fight. And you had to question where the fight would have gone if it wasn't for that eye being fucked up. So there you go. And Matisse, in my opinion, is not as good of a fighter as Keith Thurman. Also, one thing that helped Garcia in the Matisse fight was his size, right? He was able to just manhandle Matisse on the inside with his holding. I don't know if he's going to get away with that with Keith Thurman. Okay, Keith Thurman is a real welterweight, and he brings, in my opinion, I don't know which guy is the harder puncher. I have no idea. All right, but I will say this: both guys are capable of hurting the other. I mean, they have real power, right? But I think the right hand is going to be beating the combination of Keith Thurman dictating the pace, being able to fight from the outside and dictating when they get into the trenches, and that right hand that I honestly don't see any punch of Garcia's that could beat Keith Thurman to that right hand. All right. I think Garcia's punches are way too wide. Um, I remember the first. I mean, keep in mind, I understand Garcia's undefeated, and yes, he has some impressive victories, but he looked very human in many of those victories. He barely edged out Matisse, in my opinion. He was getting outboxed by Khan until he knocked him out, which has happened a lot in Khan fights. Um, he was dominating Zab Judah, and then allowed Zab Judah, of all people, to come back and rally at the end. I mean, he bloodied up Garcia and everything. Danny Garcia struggled against an old, washed-up career featherweight in Eric Morales, right, in the first fight. I mean, he struggled with this dude. I mean, he had Danny's nose bleeding, like the bridge of his nose in a way, like busted, and at times Morales was clowning him in the middle rounds because he was seeing the white hooks coming a mile away. He even mimicked it at one point. So you have to question, right, Garcia's ability to hold it together against someone who's going to have it together, right? So Keith Thurman is not an old man. He's not a career featherweight. Okay, he's not someone who's known for being mentally weak like Zab Judah, right? He's not a lot smaller than Garcia like some of his other opponents. So a lot of the advantages Garcia's had against previous opponents, he's not going to have it tonight. He's not going to have those advantages, right? It doesn't mean I think Garcia's shit or anything like that, but we got to be honest, man. He hasn't fought the stiffest competition lately, and that has to go a long way. You know, I'd rather be coming off a fight with Porter than fucking the dudes fucking Danny Garcia's been fighting. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, can't even remember that one dude's name that came up from, what was it, lightweight or whatever. It's ridiculous, right? So, well, he beat Robert Guerrero, right? But in my opinion, I mean, I think Thurman did a much better job against Guerrero than Danny Garcia did. In my opinion, that's my opinion. But but anyway, I will admit that there's this. I've always felt this. I mean, these two guys are beatable, but that's what's going to make this fight interesting. But there's also, at the same time, although they're beatable, right? They're mentally tough, you know, and they're not known for making adjustments. But I'm telling you right now is that their willingness to the toughness, right? Which toughness is overstated in boxing, in my opinion. They're all tough, right? But there's some guys that just take toughness to a whole nother level, and I think these two guys are in that department. So we're gonna see. All right, I think it's gonna be a good fight. My official prediction: Keith Thurman by decision. All right. There could be a knockout on this fight, but I'm not gonna bet on it. Right? I mean, we'll see. I hope there's a knockout. Right? I don't like it coming down to the judges, and I don't like people come like it's a close fight and people come on here. It was a robbery, man. I thought my guy won. No, my guy won, and like it gets old. So a knockout would be a blessing, right? I for sure think there'll be a knockdown at some point in this fight, but we'll see. All right. I hope it's a war, right? And I hope everybody enjoys your night of boxing. This is DStyle. I am out. Right? Don't bet the house on shit, right? Don't bet the house and come back like, well, you say you're gonna win. Like, well, I'm just saying. I'm out.